Dancers preparing backstage to perform in the Dark Crystal at the Royal Opera House. Copyright Tristram Kenton. What made you want to reinterpret Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal in a contemporary context? It's a film that left a massive imprint on me when I was little, because it was so weird and so surreal. It was the first time I'd seen really weird creatures. There were no humans in the film at all, it was completely puppets. I was reminded that the film had some really strong ecological overtones, and thought that would make a really interesting way of using it as a kind of shadow through the lens of today. It was a way of thinking about the environmental crisis without being too didactic, thinking about it in a more sensorial way, which dance does the best. The performance features pertinent spoken word poetry by Isaiah Hull, including the line, "The first thing we forgot was ice." Why did you want to incorporate verse? What we're always trying to do is tell stories in different ways and assemble different collaborators. So I find it curious that some critics say we're not interested in storytelling, because we totally are. We just aren't interested in the ways they have been told in the past in dance. Isaiah is an amazing voice, and I asked him to respond to A Dark Crystal, which he'd never seen before. He wrote a really extraordinary long-form poem, about 50 minutes in length. Then he wrote another 5 minutes which refracted it in terms of modern day. We exorcised the bits that would be perfect for the dance. You don't want to totally annotate the performance with words, because then you're not sensing it, you're in a headspace working out meaning rather than feeling it. What we're trying to do is build images that mix the senses, so you don't really know where your responses are coming from. But hopefully, those senses end up sitting in the body, and that for me is dancing. How important is costume design when you're conceiving a new work? Often people think that costume design is a type of compromise, because you are restricting the body. We can always have bodies resembling their nude physical form, but I'm really interested in how costumes affect the whole morphology of the body. This has always been the same in the history of dance. If you think back to the lumps and bumps costumes Comme des Garçons designed for Merce Cunningham in 1997, they're amazing. All of a sudden these incredibly trained dancers are working with these bulbous objects, and you just read the performance in a different way. Dancers in the NYDC being told they would be collaborating with Grace Wales Bonner. Studio Wayne McGregor. British designer Grace Wales Bonner has designed the costumes for the NYDC's Novacine. Jack Thompson. What inspired you to collaborate with Grace Wales Bonner for Novacine? It came partly from working with a really diverse mix of 40 young people from all over the UK, all with very different physical backgrounds, some with learning disabilities, some in wheelchairs. Some are really into hip-hop, urban dance, Bharatanatyam, more formal dance, but they're all doing their own thing. I wanted them to have the experience of working with an amazing designer early on, who could come to fittings and talk to them about what they're doing with their bodies in relation to the clothes that they're wearing. I love the color temperature of the work Grace makes, and her work feels like a series of variations which feels pertinent to young people. I love the idea of moving from a very monochrome color palette to more color. She was so open and has such an amazing generous soul as a designer. The moment I told those young people Grace was going to work with them, they literally flipped out. Your work has long explored how humans and technology can work together, and Novacine draws on a book by James Lovelock about benevolent AI. What are your thoughts on its dangers? I think part of the backlash is partly also a miscommunication about what all of these AI conversations are. When you're developing new technology, the ethics around it takes time. For me, it's very important for artists to be part of the conversation, so that we can also contribute to it. I've always been curious about what would happen if you worked with AI to build an incredible dance, and to see whether or not people would be able to tell whether it was handmade or not. If AI is contributing to the process, it is a fake or a real dance. Is this concept any different to, say, working with video? In 2019, we worked with Google Arts and Culture Lab, Living Archive to build an AI system which almost hijacks your physical signature and builds new versions of it. I'm fascinated by the potential of that. Ad block test. Why?